My name is Jaime Klein. I am founder and CEO of Inspire Human Resources. And most importantly, I hope that your loved ones are well and that you are staying positive and testing negative during this pandemic winter that we find ourselves in. We launched this webinar series called Redesigning the Future of Work back in the spring when all the HR and leaders that we knew were very much trying to navigate a moment for which there was no playbook. And we are thrilled to gather today to kick off 21 with the focus on interim talent. I see we have lots of folks who might be new to this gathering. Just by way of quick background, Inspire HR is an organization that helps both CEOs and chief human resource officers to solve all things people. That's kind of challenging to them. We do this in one of three ways, either through interim HR experts that help with business continuity, through helping lean teams get work done with strategic projects, or through helping to train and coach on all things HR. And we have 37 plus experts, all are part-time employees across 14 states. And we are really committed to this model, always believing that it's the future of work. And as I sat in the end of 20 and we were thinking about how to kick off 21, I was really struck by a study out of Harvard that talked about how the rise of the gig economy is the moment that is really defining business today. And it's something that we've been at for 14 years. We celebrate 14 years this very week, but it's something that is really becoming more prevalent. And the Harvard study went on to talk about the rise is due to a variety of factors pre-COVID, automation, digitization, the need to be competitive. But what COVID-19 did is it put this need on steroids, if you will, and it really sped things up. So the rise now of people bringing in talent that are zip code agnostic, that can truly parachute in to get work done, to solve surgically, solve very specific business problems, is something as a strategy that most organizations are reaching out to and that most leaders have on their agenda. So we very much wanted to kick off 21 with a focus on that. And with that, we brought together three fantastic people that I know we are in good hands with as we dive into this topic: Greg, Rosa, and Sean. So again, we wanted to bring you the perspective both from a business that is using this strategy, an expert. Sean, one of the folks on the Inspire team, is actually working as an interim expert, and we know we have lots of folks joining us who are curious about how to work in that way, as well as Rosa, who has a company similar to Inspire that does strategic marketing. So again, we'll have these three very different perspectives. So real quick, by way of background, Greg is a COO of Slick Deals, which is a Goldman Sachs company. For those of you who have not checked out Slick Deals, check it out. It is a crowdsourced shopping site, website and mobile app. Greg is a seasoned executive. He previously led operations at Demand Media, including where he was in a GM role of eHow through its IPO launch. And prior to Demand, Greg served in various management roles at Yahoo and IAC, focused on engineering, monetization, etc. Rosa is the founder and president of Martellus. It is always good to have another female founder on a panel. And Martellus, for those of you who don't know it, is a strategic consulting group whose team of fractional experts in the marketing space, they staff interim executive roles and consult with kind of leading companies, you name it. They've worked with them: Amex, Citi, Nike, LinkedIn. And prior to Martellus, Rosa served as Chief Marketing Officer and also in leadership roles at American Express within their World Service Organization. And Rosa has developed a networking platform called Next that really helps to navigate this curated small group of female executives that is her privilege to work with and help with their development. Rosa always believes in giving back. I love her spirit. And Sean, one of our fabulous Inspire experts, he's an experienced HR pro, and he most recently served as the interim CHRO for Slick Deals. So you'll get to hear Greg and Sean talk about how they made that marriage work. And Sean's experience includes global HR business partner roles at Amex, Bristol Myers Squibb, Allied Signal, and he has significant experience in org design, talent assessment, all things people. So with that, we are in great hands with these three different perspectives as we dive into this topic that is on everyone's mind. So I want to kick it off with the question of, I'd love to just start by having each of you kind of set the table, if you will, and really lay out, if you could each kind of share an engagement where you have either hired or been hired on an interim basis and some highlights, just to kind of educate folks who are new to the concept of interim. Rosa, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Jaime. And thank you for having me, because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I believe deep in my soul that there's tremendous untapped opportunity out there to create win-win situations by connecting organizations with individuals and teams that are extremely talented and have just chosen to work in a different way. And to your point about zip code agnostic, one of our clients is Citi, and they're working with one of our experts now. And this client called me and she said, how come you never brought her to me before? She's a unicorn. She's exactly who we needed. And I was like, well, because she lives in Portland, Oregon, and you guys wanted somebody in the office 2 days a week. And she looked at me, she goes, that's stupid. I'm like, no, but we're all changing how we think about work.
Absolutely.
In my experience, most companies have started their sort of experiment with interim resources in the fill-in area, what I call the fill-in area. It's your first description, Jaime, which is, maternity leaves and paternity leaves and open positions. And that's certainly a way that interim resources can add value. But I wanted to highlight an engagement that was a little different, because I think there's different ways to add value. So recently we were brought in, Martellus was brought in to work with a financial services company, B2B financial services company, that has gone to market traditionally using the sales route. They know how to hire salespeople, deploy salespeople, enable salespeople, and get customers in using salespeople. And they decided fairly recently that they need to augment that and want to build a direct to business, in this case, direct to business, more marketing way of bringing in customers. And their first foray into doing this was with a partner, with a partner. I have to keep editing myself. Don't name partners, don't name existing clients.
Of course,
right? With a partner.
Confidential. I'm with you.
So they came to us and we put together a team of 2 women. One of them was steeped in the entire direct to client funnel experience. So she knew everything from awareness generation to how to close this. She knew along the entire funnel how to drive direct to consumer marketing. And then we paired her with another expert who was less expert in direct to consumer marketing, but had worked directly with the partner for over 2 years. So between Megan with the direct marketing experience and Leslie with the partner experience, we created the unicorn for this client.
Magic.
And it was magic. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And I would say I got 4 lessons out of that. One is we want to work on things that if you really want to get the most out of interim resources, think hard about initiatives that are important and time sensitive to the organization where you need to accelerate performance, and then go out and look, because the people are out there and can be cobbled together. And you can cobble them together, not just with one head, you can use multiple. So that's one thing I would say. It's like, think about really time sensitive, high impact. Think about where knowledge transfer is critical. So this particular company did not just want to get this partnership to market quickly and generate sales. They wanted to start building a marketing competency in their organization. So the way we added value was as much about making the deal work and bring in, the X thousand sales. It was also about really upskilling a team. So that's the second area. Make sure, where transfer of knowledge is critical, we can help. And then the third knowledge is it's all about fit. And Greg and Sean will talk a lot about this. And it's not just functional fit and knowledge fit, but cultural fit. So
really good
those 3 things, important things where transfer of knowledge is critical and fit. That would be the one I would highlight.
Really good insight. I love that. Greg, thoughts from you? And again, we have the pleasure of working with Greg. I'm loving this. Yes.
Yeah, I'll dovetail that. And certainly I think we'll talk about culture and fit later on as we get in the discussion. When I think about, engagements where fractional talent has really been powerful, I probably reference our company's recent engagement with Inspire and Sean here. Slick Deals is a 21-year-old internet company, but we only started building out a formal HR function in 2018. So, pretty late to the game to kind of build a formalized function. And a year into that exercise at the end of 19, we realized that we really needed to up-level what we were trying to accomplish. in terms of our team and our capabilities. And that proved to be a great opportunity to dive in and bring on fractional talent and, Sean's expertise to really address not only, several of our kind of immediate, people growth initiatives, but also, help us understand how the HR function should work in our company and ultimately identify and help us recruit the person who would be the full-time role. And when I walked away, we're still working with Aspire, but Sean, was with us for nearly a year. Kind of highlight for me was really just the ability to tap into subject matter expertise that we didn't have in the building, and then just to do it on an immediate basis. I think those were the real two big takeaways I had.
To kind of parachute in, I always think it's like being up nights and weekends sometimes, figuring out how to help that gap get filled. And then when someone kind of comes in like a ninja, we call it, it gives you your nights and weekends back. Sean, love to hear your perspective. And again, we have many folks who are new to this concept of interim, so would love your insight.
Yeah, and just building on what Greg said, it was an amazing learning for me too. So I think the first thing I learned, I spent most of my career in large traditional companies, pharmaceutical, retail, financial services. And I always thought there was a difference between the .coms and these larger companies I had worked in before. And, probably the first important learning was culture is culture, and organizations face a lot of the same challenges. And for me walking in at first, I kind of was like, wow, this is going to be a big adjustment for me. But it was pretty easy quickly to get to know Greg, to get to know Josh, the leadership team, and hear the same conversations, have the same conversations I had had many times with leaders in different functions and different companies. And to Greg's point, the fact that they were new with HR, they'd only had HR for a year, didn't mean they didn't have a great culture. They had a really strong culture and high levels of engagement. And in fact, in some respects, HR had become a negative to that. And that was one of the challenges walking in, is to make sure that HR was adding value to this organization and it was on a fast growth trajectory, and really to leverage some of the experiences I had, which then came more into play later on when COVID hit, because then it became, all right, now we need to adjust our business model. Now we need to be more flexible. We need to think about working from home, how we do that successfully, what changes we need to make to staffing, all things I had faced before. So, for me, probably the biggest learning overall was the blurring of the lines between what a small growing company and a large traditional company need from HR. It's a lot more similar than I think I thought in the past. And the value added works both ways. I learned a lot, and hopefully they learned a lot from me as well.
Right. It was quite the match. So what we hear many times when we speak to organizations is that they're kind of on the fence about whether it's the right time to bring in a permanent hire versus bring in interim. So I'd love to hear from folks what their thoughts are and how they make those decisions and kind of the pros and the cons. So Greg, if you want to give some insight into that.
Yeah, sitting on the business side as an operator, I think the first thing that I would do, and we did, is just take a step back and think about, what are you trying to accomplish as a business over the next 6 to 18 months. Get some perspective on what is kind of the immediate, but a little bit of the longer view. And then as you look at that, then really understand, can you identify things that are either finite projects that have a defined beginning and end, or alternately, can you identify things that you simply lack the expertise inside your building? And if you were to go embark on those, you would sacrifice, time in trying to do it in-house and ramp up. Because I think, as we all know, probably the most precious commodity in any business right now is time, right? And I think those are the two things for me, as you think about diving into, fractional engagement. Those are the two dimensions that I really looked at.
Mm-hmm. Really helpful, really helpful. And I'd love to talk about that onboarding, if you will. So when an organization does decide, let's go with interim for a variety of reasons, I'd love to get some thoughts on how you make that onboarding as smooth as possible so that the interim talent can truly hit the ground running. Sean, maybe some insight from you.
Yeah, I think the important thing Greg just mentioned too is you need to have a plan. So you have the gap. That's easy to identify. Okay, we have a gap here. But what are you asking that person to be able to do to fill that gap? What's the brief before they walk in the door of, okay, here's the outcome we're looking for? I think that makes a huge difference. It can work if you say, okay, we don't know what we're doing, come and tell us what to do. But I think there has to be some plan up front of, okay, this is the gap, and this is, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, what we think it should look like. And then that person can steer along the way. But just plugging someone in, because a lot of times what you're going to do is you're going to bring in a functional expertise you didn't have. So you might not know the answer, but just plugging the person in and letting them go wild can result in some wheel reinventing, so to speak. And you want to make sure that you're really crisp in terms of what you want to accomplish. And I'd say the second thing that really mattered a lot for me was I had a lot of access to the CEO, to Greg, the COO, and the CFO in the first few weeks. And just really being able to spend time with the leadership team to understand what was going to work, what wasn't going to work, and what their priorities were made a huge difference. I think that partnership is critical from day one. It can't just be, oh, thank goodness you're here, go fix us. There is going to be a lot of back and forth, particularly in the beginning.
That's such great insight. And we hear this often from clients that it is challenging for some who are new to this concept to think, how much onboarding do I need to do? Because sometimes organizations associate it with bringing in, let's say, a Bain or a McKinsey, who are wonderful firms, but more traditional management consulting, where there is less of that onboarding needed. But this is a case where you really want someone to be an extension of the team, be on brand for the culture. And so the onboarding sounds like is just as much of an investment as it might be with a permanent hire. And in your case, Sean, you were there for a year-ish. So it was definitely, that's sometimes as long as permanent hires last, right? So it was really,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and they did a great, I mean, I was an employee basically for a year. I mean, I think if you asked most of the team, they felt that way. And that was.
Yeah, I think that's really important, setting the context, having Sean come to the organization, one, just explaining to the team, like, why interim talent is the right approach and what we're seeking to accomplish from that. And then, secondly, we'll talk about it probably more, cultural fit, vetting for cultural fit. And then third, as Sean mentioned, when Sean came in the company, we gave him a corporate email address. We had him on Slack accounts. We had, he was, viewed as an employee. And I think that's a big thing, especially today in the remote force and culture to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think, especially with roles like Rosa's organization within marketing, where it's all about the intimacy of the brand, or with people and HR, it's all about the employee experience. You don't want it to feel like they have a Yahoo address and they're kind of floating, right? You want them to really feel like they're seen, they have a seat at the table, they're in town halls, and that they're the go-to for these various initiatives. So when we think strategically about interim, in the case of kind of filling a gap, there's kind of some upskilling. And I was thinking a little bit about how to help that person be set up for success within the culture, and any sensitivities with permanent staff. Historically, sometimes folks have felt intimidated or a little uncomfortable with interim folks coming in, the thought being, well, are they going to end up taking my role? And this concept of interim is often the idea that the person does not want a full-time role. What they really want to do is provide value for a period of time, but they're not looking to kind of join the company permanently. But it can be sensitive in the way that that is all set up. So Rosa, do you have any thoughts in terms of team building or bringing people in, or ways to really deal with any of that sensitivity with the internal culture?
Yeah, I would say three things. I think you have to think very hard as a client about when you want to, what kind of consulting firm you want to bring in. So Jamie, you and I both call each other consulting firms, but consulting is not consulting. I actually, before my career at American Express, worked at a large consulting firm that no longer exists called Booz Allen and Hamilton. And our focus there was on delivering value to the senior client. So we were entirely focused on outcome. That is still when you go to a firm like ours and like Jamie's, that places interim talent and connects interim talent with opportunity, we are not our key objective is to be of service to the client. We are not looking to build careers. We are not looking to, massively increase billable hours, which was our push when I was at so the first thing is, explain why you're bringing in the kind of talent that you're bringing in. I am bringing in talent to be of service to you. So on the client side, there's a setup which is all about, this is not your typical consulting firm. This is someone I'm bringing to be of service to you. To be really corny, it's like a wind beneath your wings. They don't, it's not going to be branded. Martellus, it's not going to be, Martellus presenting to senior leadership. It's going to be empowering you. So that would be one. So that's on the client side, a proper setup with their own resources, choosing the right kind of firm, and then a proper setup with their own resources.
Great point.
But then internally, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we add value. And we believe we add value by delivering the deliverables, but also about upskilling and supporting and coaching the people we are working with as equal team members. And that's the kind of ethos that you want to look at. Frankly, I have not found this ego situation to be a problem as long as we clearly articulate up front that we are here to empower you rather than to present Martellus as the firm with the insight. Does that make any sense?
It does. I always say we parachute in with no ego and just get the work done. It's just, and I think it's also about the talent. This study that really made me think on this panel back in the fall said that 50% of gig workers see it as a career. Like this is just what they want to do. They've done the soul searching. This is their moment in time where I always say fractional work makes us whole. They've just decided that working fractionally is going to help them feel more like a whole person, whether it's whatever it is, raising kids, aging parents. We have someone actually in Sonoma, she literally has a vineyard, and we just know there are certain months that she has her crop, that she's just not free. But that's the thing that is really driving her to work fractionally. And so I think it's a little bit of about what you said, Rose. It's the communication that they really are here just for a period of time to do beautiful work.
And also, it's a beautiful way to work because you're free of politics. I was actually brought in to facilitate a meeting, and I left the meeting and I said to my client at the time, you knew this, like, I know you knew this. And she goes, it was just easier, Rosa, to hear it from someone who did not have an agenda. I'm like, okay, we can add value that way.
Absolutely. Yes, it's all about the results.
Yeah, if I could just build
Please,
on that,
Sean,
Jaime. Yeah, I think you have to look at yourself as a interim resource. You kind of have to look at yourself as an educator / expert, right?
Yes.
You are working multiple sides, and my situation was unique in that there was a sitting CHRO who was a very strong HR professional, knew the craft of HR, but hadn't been a great fit for the organization. So Greg and the team asked me, we need your help with assessing, is what we're seeing right? Are we seeing gaps, or are we just not good enough experts in HR to understand that the value, we're just missing the value? And so there was, kind of educating both sides that came in. I had a tricky situation with a person who kind of needed to be educated that the fit wasn't working, but also had to work with the leadership team to make sure their expectations were right. So we found that middle ground. I think, for a lot of people on this call are HR leaders, you're going to find that inevitably, because a lot of times we are going to be brought in to assess what's working and what's not working. And I think looking at yourself as an educator in that approach is very helpful.
Right. It's that old saying, like, you want to leave the world a little bit better than you found it, right?
Yes.
So you want to go in, I always say it's like a
Yes.
Hippocratic oath with the physician, do no
Yes.
harm, but boy, if you can leave things better and then upscale the talent, because that type of strategic view, whether it's finance or tech or PR, if you go in as fractional, there's kind of this contagious energy that you bring because you have this wealth of experience. We're going to take a quick poll. I would love to get your input. We're going to go in a moment to some other questions, but I'd love to get your input on whether your organization currently uses interim talent, just to get a sense of the folks that are with us and what type of usage folks have for this trend that is here to stay. Okay, we'll give folks just a moment to answer. Yeah, it looks like about 72%, 70%-ish of people are currently using talent that is interim. So it's great to know that is something that is more on the rise for folks, especially in the Inspire community. So, we talked a little bit about planning and assessing and onboarding, and I would love to talk a little bit about the exit strategy. I always say, the best thing you can do is always plan with the end in mind. So, by definition, the concept is that the interim engagement is not meant to last forever. So planning with the end in mind and the way that we communicate that to folks it sounds like it's invaluable from this conversation. So Greg, I'd love any tips that you can offer about the smooth, elegant exit, as I call it, to help an expert as things are winding down and coming to an end.
Sure, I'm happy to answer, and I'm sure Rose and Sean will augment that. I think it goes back to what we talked about, the energy that you put into the laying out the onboarding strategy and plan. You should also put that same energy up front into having a clear sense of what the end might look like. And when I say the end, it's, what does success look like? It goes back to what Rosa said. It's like, what are you trying to accomplish and how do you know when you've accomplished it? Having a mutual agreement, at the outset of what that's going to be really sets up the dominoes for that smooth transition. Because you know exactly when you hit that point. And then I'd say when you're approaching that point, and one of the things, working with Sean that we did, I think it was a really nice handoff, is, set a clear timeline because things are coming into view much more sharply. And then, that really means ownership of responsibilities. Like, where does the interim talent, stop and where does the go forward begin? So that there's no ambiguity in who owns what, or did it happen yet or not. And I think when you do those things, you set yourself up for a pretty, seamless transition.
Yeah,
it's great.
I completely agree with Greg on the deliverables point. The other thing that I found really useful, and it's not always possible, is to, at the outset, as you said, Greg, at the beginning, sort of identify not just the clear deliverables, what success looks like at the end, but also who's my internal running buddy or the internal running buddy with the team. This is the person we're likely transition stuff to. So even from the very beginning, we have in the back of our heads, I need to be bringing this person, either we're working side by side in some cases, or in other cases, I'm really conscious of making sure that they know what's going on so that when we hit that period that we're X weeks away from transitioning off, it's sort of seamless.
Really good insight. Really good insight. As I look at, we've such great questions in the chat, and I'm seeing we have so many HR leaders in this audience. So I would love any kind of practical advice that you could give to someone who's interested in introducing this whole concept, this new model for the first time, but they need to get their leadership on the bus. They need to get them really bought in. Sean, do you have any thoughts on that? How to tee up this idea?
Yeah, I do. It seems like we have a lot of adopters on the webinar, so they're probably already on board. But to me, the idea of resourcing is fundamentally different than it was. Rosa's example earlier about the person from Oregon is a great example. I think if you think about your, what we used to call headcount planning, you've got so many different levers you can pull now, whether that's full-time, part-time, intern, offshore, outsourced, interim, temp. I think it needs to be strategic, not a reactionary approach to how you think about the headcount of your team, of your organization. And I think, the easy sell is that most leaders will tell you that they're understaffed, right? If you ask any leader, what's on your plate, what do you need to get done, and do you have the resources to do it? 99.9% are going to say no. So I think building in a proactive way of thinking about, all right, let's solve these problems creatively. We're really good, I think, about outsourcing to vendors to do work, but actually bringing in resources who can be engaged, be part of your organization for a period of time, we're still coming up the curve on. And I think just having that same dialogue you have about how do you get the workload done and be creative about it up front is a good way to really introduce this and to get buy-in to solve a need that people know they have.
And the needs are many, especially as we enter our 11th month during COVID. So many organizations are trying to do everything from, build DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging into their business. So many clients have asked us, how do we rapidly build the business case? And I always say, if we're just focused on the business case, we're about a decade behind. We need to be building the human case for DEI. But, that is a surgical skill. It needs to be done starting in June. Just so many organizations after the murder of George Floyd needed that done. Other organizations that suddenly have, their entire, culture is now distributed workforce. People are working from home. So communications experts that can kind of create this glue that help people feel like they're part of a culture. These are just two quick examples of skills that I know every organization needs. And as we think about what the future of work looks like, I think that we are going to be more surgical, needing some very specific skills very quickly. And also, Sean, I love what you said about having, to steal a word from this COVID time, a hybrid model, where you always are intentional and you're going to have a mix of permanent and fractional. Google is forever ahead of the curve on these things. They are. Right? They're about 50-50 in terms of contingent workforce or part-time and permanent. Bridgestone, other companies in all industries really rely on this. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
One of the things that Google does, because is they are becoming clear across the entire organization about when interim resources make sense and when interim resources don't make sense. So it's not an issue like in my, when I used to work at American Express many moons ago, we'd hire consultants and then something would happen in the external environment, no consultants and no travel, and shut everybody down. And then you remember this, Sean, we'd hire consultants and shut it. Rather than having, and that may be true for like the big management consultants working on, sort of in the deliverables-based model we talked about earlier. I think the world has changed and we have to think about interim resources, not that way, but to your point, Sean, as part of the hybrid model, when do they make sense and when don't they make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And just be clear across the entire organization about that. Because I think, I don't see that clarity across most of my clients.
And that's the intentional piece. And I think it's funny, I think for Amex, I think we've done 31 parental leaves there. I always say we're like a doula, like they'll call and so we're like part of the plan. So there are some organizations that use us in that way. So it really started, I think, this focus on interim for organizations that were best place to work, focus on business continuity. But the other area where we see it come up a lot is we have a role that has been open so darn long and it cannot be open longer. Can we please, we helped out the 9/11 museum for a period of time with that kind of a situation. So those types of things. So that is kind of, I think, where the rise started. But this moment, this COVID moment, this piece that Harvard was talking about, it's the acceleration of just rapid, business decisions, automation. We just, most organizations, like they just need help to kind of keep up as things really grow. So I'd love to hear as we think this through, are there certain roles within an organization where interim is not a good match or where it's more conducive to do an engagement in this way? Rosa, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say three things. I think in terms of projects, I think projects that are more strategic in nature than technical lend themselves to this kind of model, because I think there's an opportunity for someone to come in or a team of people to come in and add value quickly. So I would think about that. And there's a lot of technical resources out there and there's different ways to get them, probably cheaper ways to get them. I think things that are episodic and time sensitive rather than ongoing. I do agree with you, Jamie, if you have something that's been open forever and you have, there are 12 direct reports dying, do something about that. But generally things that are episodic rather than ongoing. And then the third thing that I was just thinking about last night was something that I typically don't think about, but we do a lot of, is where we want to accelerate the performance of a senior leader. So in my career at Amex, I spent 15 years in marketing. And one day I woke up and the powers that be, which is how it worked, Sean, as you know, decided that I was going to move over to servicing and run new accounts operations with 3,000 reps, never done it before, and global customer experience. If I had had the ability to access a senior operations leader as a coach for my first 3 months, I could have gotten from 0 to 60 in 6 months rather than a year. And I would have been a lot more productive. And the 4,000 people who work for me would have been a lot more productive. So that's the third area. I think strategic projects over technical, episodic over ongoing, but also think about, and this is something people don't think about, if you have senior roles with lots of leverage, lots of people depending on them, and you really want to accelerate their learning curve, that's a place to bring them in. And in fact, I had just thought about this last night in preparation for this. We had a woman who took a marketer who took over credit and collections at a large bank, and which is, as you guys know, sort of a compliance and regulatory complex area. One of our experts ran global credit and collections at American Express. They got on the phone every hour, every week for an hour for the first 3 months. And at first, Michelle's job was to make sure she knew the things that could get her in jail. And these are the 3 things that you need to improve your performance. And our client felt she got up to speed much faster than she would have otherwise. So this senior leadership council or learning curve acceleration would be the 3rd place that I would suggest people think about.
Yeah, if I could just build one additional too, a learning for me at Slick Deals, and I think this is where, Jamie, you said earlier with DEI, there are a lot of functions that are really exploding, especially the last 12 months, right? So as I think about it, Slick Deals, things like search engine optimization, search engine marketing, data engineering, DEI, every company woke up one day and decided, oh boy, we need to do this. And so hiring people is going to be difficult, right? The war for talent who have expertise in all of these areas is so hot right now that you're either going to overpay or worst case scenario, overpay and get a underperformer. And I think this is one of the areas where, looking at those emerging skill sets, so those emerging areas of expertise you need, I think you can fill that a lot more quickly. And like Rosa said, you can come up to speed so much faster by bringing in an expert for a period of time, rather than trying to go to market and fighting with 500 other companies to hire the 3 people who are available and ready for full-time work in that expertise.
Jamie, we lost your microphone.
We lost your mic.
Sorry, that was the sign language portion of our program. Sorry. So, so Greg, you brought up something earlier, which I thought was so important, which is culture. And I always say culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, you can have the best strategy in the world, but culture is really the thing that makes an organization tick. So culture is such an important secret ingredient of the DNA of the organization. So I'd love to hear thoughts folks might have on how culture plays a role and how you determine and assess for cultural fit when bringing an interim person in.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick it off and then
please.
Sean can augment. For us, culture at our company is paramount. It's the number one thing that, as we were looking to bring in interim talent, that I was looking for. Sean mentioned, although we didn't have an HR function, we had a really, really strong culture. And in order for anyone coming in to be successful, I think it was really important to make sure that, Sean spoke with, as he already said, 2 to 3 senior leaders in the company and really got a sense for what are we trying to accomplish? How does our team go about doing that? What role will culture play in that execution? And I think that's really important to set you off on the right foot, because I do think there's a lot of folks out there and a lot of talent that will come to the job with the qualifications and the skills, but it may not be the right fit. And it goes to the onboarding and it goes to all the things we talked about. It just, making sure you dial in the cultural component perfectly really will make or break the engagement.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And I completely agree with Greg. The other thing I would say is, at the beginning, you try to make sure that there is a cultural fit, but then at Martellus was like, and then we're going to set culture to neutral and check in 30 days. So, even with the best of efforts, sometimes we get it wrong.
Sure.
So in 30 days, my commitment would be, Greg, I'm going to call you and we're going to talk about whether there's fit. And what I mean by set to neutral is whether there's fit or no fit is no reflection on the company or the expert, right? So just be really open. If there's no fit, there's no fit. And I'd much rather within 30 days assess that, because you typically know, and then we'll just swap somebody else in.
Yeah.
Or another team in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just as an HR professional, just building on that a lot of times you're accountable for culture, right? As the HR leader, or you're the steward of the culture. So knowing what that is, and frankly, being honest with yourself about whether that's a good fit for your style and your approach is key. I mean, that anecdote from my experience walking in the door, the person I took over for had a Wonder Woman sticker on her desk and took the approach of I'm here to save the day. Like, I'm here to change your company and make it work better and really transform and be the hero. And I think Greg will probably validate, I think a lot of them kind of said, well, we didn't know we needed saving. We just needed a recruiting tech. We just needed some processes implemented. And so there was a mismatch in terms of what the person thought they were there to do and what the leadership team and the employees wanted them to do. So really being honest, I think, with yourself is important, because it's easy to sign up when somebody wants you, but you have to make sure it's the right fit.
And we're going to, in a moment, just go to some of the Q&A. There were so many great questions in the chat. Rosa, were you going to say something else?
No.
Okay. So a question that came up in the chat is, can you talk about kind of that fine line between fractional employment and when that inadvertently turns into the risk of co-employment? There's been a lot of legislation around this. And so when does your ninja start to look and feel like a full-time permanent employee, but not receive all the same benefits, et cetera? And I have some thoughts on that. Rosa, others, if they have thoughts as well.
I get nervous when things go longer than a year. So that would be one thing. I just get nervous. I'm not saying I don't like.
Yeah.
And the other thing we do, even with the longer term assignments, is we set quarterly deliverables. What do you need this quarter? And let's set quarterly deliverables. We almost start and end. We almost take the year-long assignment and make it into discrete chunks. And at the end of every quarter, we honestly assess whether we believe we are still being of service and adding value or not. And if not, there's a couple times we've told our clients, I think it's time to transition. So make everything a quarterly project. And I would say, watch out for things that go longer than a year. I don't know how Greg and Sean feel about that.
Yeah, I think our engagement with Sean, we mentioned a few times, was nearly a year. It was probably really unique. I mean, at the outset, it was a 3-month goals, objectives. And then, the world decided to have a pandemic. So that kind of threw a monkey wrench in it. And our best option, because fractional talent really gives you optionality, our best option was to keep Sean in the building, working with the team, because he had already, come up to speed. He knew the challenges we were trying to face. So yes, our HR roadmap and plan totally changed, but we had someone in the building that was really able to adapt with us. And so, Sean really helped us in those first few months of COVID.
Yeah, that consistency was really key. COVID changed so many rules. Just one thing with Inspire, everyone is they're all part-time W-2s. They're all part-time employees. They accrue for sick time. We do our annual harassment training, which is mandatory, which we'll do in February. Based on hours, they could be eligible for an Inspire 401k contribution. So those are things that we very much have in place. We very much see folks as employees of Inspire. There are so many other questions. I just want to make sure we get to them too. So education of leaders is so critical. To anyone on the panel, what are your thoughts around helping leaders and decision makers understand the long-term benefits and ROI of investing the dollars up front and bringing in expertise that can do the work also, but be an internal coach mentor to full-time employees? So specifically when budgets are such an imperative and seem to be often an impediment, how is that handled? Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies by what type of company that you're at. I mean, we're a privately held company by Goldman and Hearst. So maybe you've got a little bit more leeway there. I think for us, the investor lens for me is really optionality. And I think, a board and investor, really likes that, especially depending on how they're choosing to invest in the company, because it doesn't put a lot of fixed cost in the business that, if your plans were to change or pivot, in a year, suddenly now you have to think about, well, what am I going to do with this new division, group, department that I built up? So, optionality is probably number one. And then number two, I think any investor or business owner operating business, you want to accomplish as much as you can in the quickest amount of time possible. And I think that also, there's a premium to be paid for that. If we were trying to go it alone on, building a professional HR organization or a company, it might have taken us a year, 2 years. But to make an argument that, hey, there's some really critical people growth initiatives that we could accomplish in, 3 to 5 months if we brought in someone that is a real CHRO, that you'll pay up for that, because you'll get the dividends on the back end. And so I think optionality and maximizing and accelerating time, those are the two big things.
Yeah, we call those high return engagements where, Sean, you could come in and you did not have to learn exactly how the technology platform powering Slick Deals worked to actually add value. You could come in with your expertise and immediately start sort of helping to move forward the key initiatives. So those are the kinds of engagements where, where we think that you can start making the case, because the expert can come in and add value very quickly. So for example, the example I laid out at the beginning, they want, it was a high return engagement from our perspective because they had their B2B sales model. They knew how it worked. They wanted somebody to come in who knew something completely different and didn't really have to deeply learn the details of the existing business. So we could add value very quickly, high return, if you will, or time, as you say, Greg.
Yeah, which is the ultimate precious resource. Great question here. Do any of you have experience to share of what did not go well and lessons we may be able to learn from that?
Two things. So when I tell you that we check for fit after 30 days, is because there was an engagement in which I did not do that. And the person who looked perfect on paper just organizationally didn't fit with the group that she was working with. Super talented, can be placed in other places, didn't really fit. And we could have swapped it out much earlier and done better for the client. That's one. And the second is actually having the discipline of breaking up every engagement, regardless of length, into these quarterly how we add value buckets, so that we knew all the time how we were being of service and just not letting things run too long would be the two pitfalls that caused us to change the way we worked.
It's funny, as a founder, everything that we have in place is there because we had an oops
because
moment,
we screwed it up at some
that's
point.
how you learn.
Yes.
That's how you learn. Absolutely. And just to take, gracefully move forward. And Greg, Sean, any thoughts on that?
I've been lucky enough. I haven't had any engagements go sideways, so I don't have any more stories to share.
Okay. All right. This one is for Sean. Sean, what is your biggest challenge as an interim expert and how did you conquer it?
I think the biggest challenge was getting confident in being able to have an impact in a short period of time, because it was new. For all of us going into a new organization, understanding the culture, understanding the priorities, understanding how the business works, all of those things are new, regardless of what your experience has been in the past. But you have to be able to trust your judgment. You have to be able to trust that assessing the culture and knowing where you can have an impact and going to school, so to speak, on the culture of the organization are the keys to success. Because there were a lot of levers I was able to pull once I realized that there's a lot of similarities to the challenges that Greg was talking to me about. So I think really just, I had a leader I worked with once who said, joining an organization is like you have to be a spy, basically. You have to infiltrate. You have to really observe and understand the nuances within the organization. And then all the skills and all the experiences you've had in the past will start pouring out. And that's kind of how it felt for me.
Yes, people are people. Rosa, from your perspective, any challenges that you've just heard over time from your experts and how they conquered it, if you have any wisdom there?
I think two things. One is what Sean was talking about, is having confidence in your ability to add value quickly based on your expertise. And often I talk to my experts about, you can do this. We did a piece of work for the Council on Foreign Relations, and they wanted to, this is not confidential, they wanted to re-platform their email. And I was talking to an expert and she's like, I've done email, but I just, I've never done not-for-profit. I'm like, you have done more email in, your pink, you have more email expertise in your pinky than that entire organization does. So confidence. And the second piece is being able to psychologically deal with the uncertainty. So unlike a full-time job, there are peaks and valleys. You do not always know what you're going to be doing 3 months from now. And sort of making sure that you have the sort of, not fortitude, but orientation to ride with that is, I think, super important. Otherwise, it will drive you crazy. Sean, does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the only thing I would add to my, I left out before is stop selling once you're in the door too. Once you're in the door, you've sold, right? They've embraced you. They want you in there. So you don't need to constantly try to be proving yourself. What you need to be doing is helping the company achieve what they want to achieve.
Yes.
And I think it can go wrong when you are trying to, be the expert that was brought in, as opposed to now being a key part of the organization.
Yeah, we try to say, and this sounds really hokey, but if you really internalize it, it's super important. We do not sell, we serve. We do not sell. And if you keep that orientation, everything will take care of itself, I think.
Well said. Well said. This is a great question about this COVID moment that we find ourselves in. Does COVID or remote work make engaging interim talent more or less difficult? And are you doing anything differently in this climate? I'll just kick that one off. It's interesting, as Rosa said, we historically, when we would speak to prospective clients that needed a hand, we would ask this question: what percentage of time do you want them ideally working on site versus virtual? And there would be these moments where we would have a perfect person on the team that just could not be there. And now that we're at this moment where everyone is zip code agnostic globally, I think it has been so much easier to bring in interim talent. The challenge, I think, is a little bit around the onboarding. So Sean, you were on site between the offices in Las Vegas and LA for months before COVID hit. So that groundwork was there. So that part, I think, from our perspective, is a little bit trickier, that it all is virtual. Nothing that we can't overcome, but that would be the one hiccup with COVID. Any thoughts from folks on how COVID and remote work make this less or more difficult?
I think it goes to what you said. It's all about a level playing field. Pre-COVID, we were co-located in 2 offices. So in order for it to be successful, Sean really needed to be at one of those locations with some amount of frequency for us to really engage with him and feel it. And now that everyone's working from home, at least our company, it's a level playing field. And so I think you have to put the same thought into the onboarding and the strategy and the success plan, all that. But I do think it's the same as it was before, because everyone's on the same playing field now, just remote. So I do think it can be very, very successful.
Yeah.
And we've actually onboarded a number of interim experts, in COVID, that have really had, as much of an impact and output as Sean did on our organization.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We're all in these 1 inch by 3 inch Brady Bunch boxes. No matter whether you're interim, a founder, we're all in the same sea, just in same storm.
And I would say the onboarding challenge, because I have a unique perspective I will share with you guys, is the same whether it's an interim resource or a full-time employee. So my son is 23 years old. He started working at his firm as a trader on a sales desk, and then after 6 months of taking every test you have to take to be able to do that, series 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever they are. And then he got sent home. And his firm is being very conscious about onboarding these new employees. So he sits where I sit right now and has dinner with his boss once a month. So they order him food. So I would say 2 things. One, the zip code agnostic thing has opened the world to interim talent. And I would say the onboarding challenge, it's there, but it's the same challenge that you have onboarding new employees, which is how do you build relationships when you can only see people in a Brady Bunch box?
It's funny. We have a COO who just started with us, and I don't know if he's on, but we're surprising him by sending a bottle of wine to his home today, because tomorrow he and I are having drinks at 4:30.
Correct.
So it's just kind of the way that we're all innovating. And Gabriel, if you're on, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and the wine is on its way. But the idea is that, it's just creating, we had a virtual, I do an annual thank you party every year around Thanksgiving, just to bring the team together. This year, usually we volunteer, we do a cooking class. This year we did virtual family feud. And it's just about kind of reimagining how to create that sense of community. Last question: are there certain kinds of businesses, high growth, large, Fortune 500, et cetera, that are more likely to turn to interim talent or able to gain more benefit for interim than others?
We work with Fortune 100 companies, and they use us all the time. So I would be interested So that's my perspective. Greg, you have a different perspective.
I think it works on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, we're a company that's less than 200 people, you know, high growth, at Fortune 100. It's all about how you set up what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's going to work or not. But I do think it can work on the full spectrum.
Okay, great. We are at the top of our hour. I could go on forever talking about this topic, but I'm so thrilled that we were able to create the time and the space to dive in what Harvard is calling the moment that is really defining the economy. And with 50% of gig workers looking at this as their career, this is just how they're doing it. I think the most modern organizations are very much prioritizing how all this works. So with that, Greg, Rosa, Sean, thank you so much for your time. I hope that all of you continue to stay positive, test negative, and we will see you again next month for our next session of Redesigning the Future of Work. Take good care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for having
you.
me. Thank
Everyone,
you. Bye,
thanks for
everybody.
having us.